We are still in the quarterfinals of the World Cup, and we are going to have a look at the biggest surprise of the tournament so far, which is the 28 years old Grandmaster from Azerbaijan. His name is Nijat Abasov, very strong player, but he has defeated already some very big favorites of this event, including, of course, Anish Giri, multiple Russian champion, and also former World Cup winner Peter Svidler was one of his victims. And in the quarterfinals, he is playing with the white pieces in the game 2 against Vidit from India. Because in the first game, after a big fight in an endgame, a rook endgame, the players agreed to a draw on move 109. Now, with the white pieces, Abasov has the chance to reach the semi-finals. But of course, Vidit will also try to do his best. Let's see what's going to happen in this game as Vidit, playing with the black pieces, goes for knight f6 against the move 1d4, knight f3, d5, and Abasov, playing very solid chess, goes for the move bishop f4, London system, c5, e3, knight c6, knight bd2, very well-known, typical developing play, often seen at club level as well. This London system, with the pawns on the dark squares and the bishop outside the pawn chain, it's very difficult to crack. There are some sharp lines for black trying to eliminate this bishop with moves like knight h5, trying to create an imbalance of knight against bishop. If you play it right away, there is the move bishop to g5, and your knight is not looking too great. The alternative is to try to trade off the bishops with the move bishop d6, but then the bishop goes to g3, and you don't really want to take on g3 because of pawn from h2 recaptures. Vidit has a different plan. Plays the move bishop e7, with the idea that if white continues making normal developing moves like bishop d3, now the move knight h5 is very interesting. At least black gets that type of imbalance it was looking for, because the bishop can't go away from the threat of knight capturing it. So instead of bishop d3, white goes h3. So the bishop can always drop back to h2 in case the knight goes to h5. But here, Vidit's plan is to play the move bishop d6. This is violating the golden rules of the opening. Don't play twice with the same pieces. But this is still very well-known theory. And the idea is that because that pawn is on h3, you're no longer able to drop back to g3. I mean, you can do it, but allowing black to capture on g3 and you're being forced to take back with the f-pawn is really ugly regarding your pawn formation. You get a vulnerable pawn on e3, so white is not interested in that. Abasov played here the move d takes c5, bishop takes c5, and only now the bishop goes to d3. This is a big change in the position, because black has an extra pawn in the center, but it's not that simple to advance the pawn. But with the next move, bishop d6, black is actually preparing this move e5, attacking the bishop. If the bishop goes away, it's e4, and both the bishop on d3 and the knight on f3 are under threat. So bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, and here another very subtle move, queen c2. Other moves are definitely playable as well, but I think the queen is excellently placed on this diagonal, and we will soon see why. Various options. I would say castling kingside is by far the most logical move. Was not played in the game, but I will show you how black could try to treat such a position. Let's say white's going to castle as well. I think it makes a lot of sense to place the pawn on h6 so that your knight no longer has to keep the pawn on h7 defended. If white is going to play the move e4, now I would like to drop back with my queen from the d file. I would like to place it on c7. I think that's a nice square to go to. You're vacating the d file. The rook can come over there very soon. And after e takes d5, you will not be forced to take back with your pawn, but you can take with a knight. And here we see how important it was to advance that pawn to h6. Now it cannot be taken. The position is very equal. And I think castling kingside, that's definitely what you would like to do. Keep the symmetry with the kings. In the game, Vidit had a different plan, and I'm not a fan of it. He played here the move knight e5. He definitely wants to get rid of the nice bishop on d3. But after knight takes e5, queen takes e5, you're spending more time playing with the same pieces, while the other pieces, they are still on their initial squares. White castled, you would expect Black to castle here as well, but now after something like e4 and rook e1, there is a bit of pressure. Black instead didn't castle, played the move bishop d7. White plays e4, and this also comes with a subtle threat, not to take on d5, but let's say black places its bishop on c6, was not the game's continuation. But of course you're planning to take on e4 now. White is gonna place its knight on f3 to attack the queen. Queen goes away, and then there is this move e5 attacking the knight, and you're playing against that bad bishop. Later on you put a rook on e1, a knight on d4. Very nice positional advantage for white. So after e4, d takes e4, knight takes e4 is played, and if you would exchange knights here, let's say knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, it's clear that white's bishop is quite an unpleasant piece to deal with, because the pawn on b7 is a weakness, the pawn on h7 potentially is a target, or at least black has been prevented from castling kingside. Rook can come to e1, also the queen is badly placed in the center. Now the center gets opened for the white rooks to place their rooks on these open files. I definitely like white. In the game there followed knight d5. Vidit avoids the exchange of knights, but rook fe1 is played anyway, and still you're not able to castle kingside because of the move knight c5, and there are simply too many threats. Everything is hanging, and this is cost black material. Therefore bishop c6 played first, but now white places the other rook on the open file, and it's clear that white has a nice lead in development. Still castling kingside is not an option, this time because of knight g3, attacking the queen, attacking the pawn on h7, and thanks to the knight on g3, the queen can't go to h5 as it will be taken. Queen on h5 would have protected the pawn, but that's not possible, means that black is losing a pawn here. In the game, black had no choice. Now, having violated all these opening rules, black decided to castle queenside, and it's positioned with opposite castled kings. Is this leading to a sharp game? We will see. White played here the move bishop f1. I like this move quite a lot. Bishop is a good defender in case it's needed, but you're also clearing the d-file so that rooks can be swapped later on. King b8 was played, and here there are various plans, but the main plan for white is to advance its queenside majority. I think the move c4 could have been considered right here as well, but in the game there followed the move queen d2 first. This is also an interesting idea, because you're planning to play c4, and if the knight goes away, then this rook on d8, it's defended only once, so you could win two rooks for the queen, and that's definitely gonna favor white in such position. So the queen goes back to c7 to protect the rook one more time, but now the knight comes into c5. Very nice move. The knight cannot easily be kicked out there. In case of a move like b6, there is knight a6 with a huge knight fork, so that's why the knight is quite stable. Another idea is to get your queen over to g5 and start tickling the pawn on g7. So black goes h6, white goes c4, chasing the knight away. The knight went to e7, so now the queen is under threat. Queen goes to c3, attacking the pawn on g7. Black goes knight f5, because the alternative f6 cannot be played here because pawn on e6 is hanging. So knight f5, and you see that black is not having a clear plan. White instead goes for the move b4, and this pawn is nicely supporting the knight, but there are also other ideas, and as I said, b6 is never an option because of knight a6 with a deadly knight fork. So black instead initiated the exchange of pieces, went for rook takes, rook d8. Rooks are coming off the board, but white's majority is much further advanced. b5, attacking the bishop on c6. Bishop goes back to e8, and now the other pawn comes in. These pawns are really far, and what can black do in the meantime? Well, that's not clear at all. Your king is quite open, and white has a simple plan of moving the knight away and just further push the pawns and receiving the support from bishop, knight, and queen against a potentially open king. It's like a free attack. Black played here king c8, knight b3 back. Black goes f6. Finally, that move is possible. Now the knight is no longer on c5, the pawn on e6 is not under threat, but white goes a5. Queen to d1. Queen enters, but what's it gonna do there? Well, it's basically a prophylactical move, as white has been prevented to play here c5. Runs into bishop takes b5, and the bishop on f1 is pinned. So therefore, next move is very logical. Queen b4, overprotecting the pawn on b5. And who knows, maybe at some point the queen can infiltrate, or even just play queen c5 with check. Things are starting to look very suspicious for black. Black goes b6 to cover that square, but after a takes b6, the other pawn comes in. You're about to create a protected passed pawn, or perhaps even take the pawn on b6, b takes c5, queen takes c5, the black king is wide open, and where should it go? If you go back to the center, there's this move b6, and the pawn is just advancing. The knight on b3 can't be taken because queen c7 is a huge mating threat. Therefore, the king instead went to b8. But now it's queen b6 with check. King goes to c8, and now it's queen takes e6 with check. Attacking the bishop. Bishop goes to d7, attacking the queen, but the queen keeps the knight defended. Queen goes back to c4. White is just a big pawn up. Is this enough to win the game? King to d8. b6. The extra pawn is mobilized straight away. Queen goes back into defense to attack the pawn on b6. Queen g8 check. Can't do much with your king. Well, you can go to e7, but now the pawn goes to b7, and you're threatening to promote the b pawn as the queen supports the b8 square. Bishop e8, and now how to make further advances. Well, very nice move. The bishop is a bad defender. You can play here the move bishop to b5, putting pressure on that bishop as bishop takes b5, runs into b8 queen, and the queen on g8 protects the queen on b8. So that's game over. In the game, instead, there followed the move queen to d1 check, king h2, queen d6. If you go king g1, it's leading to a repetition of moves. That's not what white wants. White played here the move g3. Checks are over. Queen takes e8 is still a threat. Bishop f7 attacking the queen, but after b8 queen, bishop takes g8. You can take the bishop on g8, but much faster here is the move queen e8 with checkmate. The queen is protected by the bishop. The king can't go anywhere, and that means that Nijat Abasov is advancing to the next round, to the semi-finals. And if you have put your money on that before the tournament, you would be multimillionaire for sure. This is something nobody predicted. He's the big surprise of the event. And interestingly, I've played Abasov back in 2008 and 2015. I'm in a plus score. I've won and half against him. So I'm really proud of that. I knew he was going to be a good player, but I would have never expected him to be in this position. And especially playing on home turf in Baku. That's some big news for Azerbaijan chess. So congratulations on him. I hope you like this video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we are back with much more coverage from this exciting event.